Hi, right, welcome to this tutorial. This one came about from a question from Zach, who was having problems with his TR-8 recording audio and MIDI. I believe he's using a Mac with Ableton Live, and he's got a separate audio interface. There's no simple way of doing this because you can't use two audio devices at the same time within Ableton Live, which I think is a bit annoying. Before I moved over to Ableton a few years ago, I used to use Cakewalk Sonar, and you could use multiple sound cards in that, and life was a lot easier. But we can't, so we've got to deal with it. So I'm going to just kind of try and do this video in sections and just try and address different ways of how I personally would record audio and MIDI from the TR-8 in different ways. First thing I'm going to look at is just basically the setup that we've got at the moment. So if I just use my webcam, so hopefully that's the right way around. So we've got TR-8 here. Now normally I've got an MX1 over here. Normally I would use that as my sound card, but to kind of try and replicate the setup that Zach has, I'm using just this cheap old Lexicon audio interface here. So I've got my output. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but that's basically going out. The main output is going out to my monitors. So I'm using that to start with as my sound card, and then to get the sound from the TR-8, because this has only got a single input on the front. If you've got stereo inputs, then fine. But I'm taking the mono out from the back of the TR-8 there. Just do the mono because I've got a single one going to the input of that. So if I now press play on the TR-8, let's just turn it up a bit. Okay, we're getting the sound passing through the sound card into the monitors. So setup for that might be different on a Mac because I'm using ASIO drivers, which I don't think you have on a Mac, but it doesn't particularly matter. I've basically just got this. It comes up as a USB audio device. You can see that is the one I'm using as my sound card. In terms of how I have the TR-8 set up for the purposes of this within MIDI, I've got it so it's taking its MIDI clock from Ableton Live. Simple way of doing it. I basically got on the inputs. It comes up with TR-8 and TR-8 control. In fact, if you just click them all on, actually no, I don't think you want remote on. I think just click on track and sync on each. What will happen now is if I press play on live, it starts the TR-8 playing. Okay, so it's synchronized to live. So if I slow it down on live, okay, it's going to slow down, and that's going to stay locked together to that tempo. That makes recording a lot easier because obviously everything is synchronized together. The settings to do that on the TR-8 to make sure you've got the it's set to internal clock is, if you just turn it off and then you turn it on holding down pattern select, that again, and if I come on here, so you've got these are different options here. Number one, if it's unlit, means this is using its internal MIDI clock. If it's lit up, it means it's on external, or it's on auto, so it will take the MIDI clock from Ableton. So make sure that one is lit up. Once you're happy with that, press start stop. That will sort of enter that in, and it will be set up for that. So the simplest way of recording the audio is to just have all your drums on one track. So for example, I've got this little beat going off here. Okay, so I would have all my levels adjusted on the TR-8, and I would kind of do the mix on there first, and then I would have basically one drum track that would come here into Ableton Live. Now I'm just gonna have to, let me just restart this. I'll just pause the video 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So it's just because I turned the TR-8 off, I just restart Ableton just to get it synchronized up again. So if we want to record that drum track, I'm going to record it onto audio track 1. Let's just get rid of that MIDI channel just to tidy things up a little bit. So I'm taking my input just from channel 1 because channel 2 is stereo. Remember, I've only got a single cable coming out of my TR-8. So if I do that, it's going to do it as one mono file, but it will be a nice mono file rather than all pan to the left or all to the right. It's going to have it monitoring in for now. So I've just record that track. When I now press record on here, it will count in and then it will start the TR-8 playing. Let's just get the camera on there. Okay, and then up on screen we can see the audio here going into Ableton. So that's a little bit soft on the volume, so you need to do a bit of trial and error just to get a decent signal. Just turn my speakers down a little bit. So I personally would have that around there. So we're getting a nice reasonable signal off that. Okay, so we've got a decent sort of recording there. So let's just have a listen back to that. Now what will happen, of course, is when I play back, it's going to trigger the TR-8 again. So you can either turn that off the setting for triggering it, or as soon as you start playing it, just press stop on the TR-8, which I'll do here. Just 1 second. I've got my outputs wrong here. Okay, that needs to be on 1 and 2. Let's try that one again. Okay, so now we're listening to the audio from just Ableton. You can see the TR-8's not playing. You can hear it's a bit quiet now, so it'll get louder in a second on this bit. Okay, so hopefully you can hear the audio from that. I've just basically, it's just picking up on the microphone, so it might be a bit soft. So that's a simple way of doing it. That should be lined up nicely on the grid. I mean, it looks pretty close as long as you've not got too much latency. Worst case, if you are, yeah, it's perhaps a little bit out on there. Easiest thing to do to line it all up is use the old magic warp button. So I would just warp from the beginning. So you can see there should be number 1. If we start 1 1 1 there, everything's nicely lined up on the grid. Yep, and that should be spot on then with your metronome, because you can get some latency issues with stuff, but that's an easy way of getting around that if you want to be making sure you're exactly spot on. Right, so that's part 1, just basically recording all of the output from the TR-8 within Ableton. Now if you're happy with doing that, great, nice and simple. But obviously, when it comes to mix down, you are stuck with that one drum file. So if you want to go in and compress just your kick drum or put a bit of reverb on the snare drum, obviously you can't do that. So that's where it starts to get a little bit more complicated and a little bit fiddly, and I'm going to address that in the next section. So I will be back shortly. Okay, so we're back for the second part. I forgot to actually say at the beginning of the first part, the only way of connecting stuff to the computer is just by USB. I've got USB from the TR-8, USB going into the laptop, and then just a USB connection from the sound card, again going into the laptop. That's just a very, very simple connection way of doing it. Right, so for recording audio from the TR-8, I personally would never do it like this, purely because you're limited to that one file and you can't go back in and change or put effects on, which makes mixing basically virtually impossible. So there's a couple of ways you can do getting the separate bits of the drums onto separate tracks, both of which are a bit long-winded and a bit of a faff, but it's the only way I've worked out how to do it. If anybody else knows anything different, then please let me know. And please, 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 Ableton, can we have in the next update or the next version of Ableton the ability to use multiple sound cards, because it would make life so much easier. Right, one very, very long-winded way of doing it would be to, let's say we're going to have the kick drum on this track. So let's rename that kick. Once we've got your song written, what I would do is on the TR-8 is I would basically just have to mute all the tracks that we don't want to play. And so when I press play now, all I'm going to get is the kick drum. Okay, so what I would then do is record the kick onto there. Okay, I'll just do a few bars of that. I would then, I think what other parts I've got on here. Okay, I've got a snare drum. Yeah. I would then put in a new audio track. Shortcut, Control T, if you don't know that one. Very quick way of getting the audio track in. Let's rename that snare. Take the record off that, record this one. Make sure just the snare is soloed, and then record that. Okay, we now have our snare drum part, which is a bit quiet. I would need to sort of sort the volumes out on that, but I can of course just boost the gain on here just to get it up. So if we play those two back, because it's triggering everything at the same time, they should be all in line with each other. I'm just going to, as soon as I press play, I'm going to press, in fact, I'm just going to mute everything off on the TR-8, then we won't hear that as it plays back. So this is just coming from Ableton. Okay, so you basically have to go through your whole song and record each bit separately, which is a pain, but it's doable. You know, it's not the end of the world. And then that way round we can, let's just get that down there. I'll just loop this round. You've then got obviously the ability to put effects and so on. So let's say the snare drum, we want some stupid, let's put a load of reverb on so you can hear it. There we go. Okay, so we've now got the ability to obviously do whatever we want to those individual parts of the drum kit when we're mixing down. So that's quite time consuming. If you've got a long, you know, if you've got a 10-minute minimal techno track and you've got, I don't know, 7 drum parts, it's going to take you 70 minutes to do that one track at a time. But that is the one way of doing it without having to change any of the settings within Live. The other way to do it is to record them all together simultaneously. And the only way you can do that is to use the TR-8 as your audio interface. Now this could be temporary to do it, and then you can switch back afterwards. So I'm still using my ASIO drivers, but if I select the TR-8 as my audio interface, let's just get rid of these. Now, because of course I'm still taking the audio output, the main output from the TR-8 into my sound card, it's still going through the speakers, so I don't have to fiddle about with any different connections from that. I've still got that connection going in there. When you select the TR-8 as your sound card, what you need to do is make sure you've selected, not necessarily the mono ones as well, but I tend to, on the input and output configuration, the input one is the most important one. I just get all of those selected. Okay, oh, it's not done it for some reason. So I didn't click OK. There we go. Yeah, cool. So I can now choose on my external in, we get all these inputs. Now the way it works on the TR-8, I believe it starts on, the kick drum is input 3. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. So what we would need to do is my kick drum would need to come in on 3. My snare would be on 4. Let me just see what other parts I've got on here. I've not got any toms. Okay, let's put the claps in there. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the clap is going to be on 9. So we'll put a new audio track in. We'll name that clap. Get rid of that. I'm just going to swap them around just so we're sort of in some sort of order. And you can actually see if I play the TR-8 and go to these external ins, you can see all the channels that we've got. So you can see we've got stuff on 9, 10, 11 and 13. So I know the clap is on 9. Okay, so if I now arm all of the tracks that we want to do, you might just need to change your options for that, because sometimes it will go on record here. I don't think which one it is. I think yes. If it's exclusive on there, what will happen is, I think if I'm right, if you do that one, you can only record one at a time. Okay, and that will happen. I think you can get over it by pressing Control. You can, yeah. If you hold Control down, you can select them one at a time like that. I generally don't do it like that, just purely for ease of being able to record several tracks at once. So take that off, and we all arm all those. So what will happen now when we press record? You've only basically got to let your track play through once. It's still got to go through in real time, but the kick will be recorded onto this track, the snare onto that, the clap onto that, like this. Okay, now for some reason the kick was sounding weird on that, but let's see what it sounds like. But hopefully you can see. There's your kick, there's your snare, there's your claps on the bottom. If you just mute everything out on the TR-8, and we're playing just from Ableton. Hold on, now we're still getting something weird going off here because I don't know why. I think it's still, yeah, if we turn these, because it's playing, I think that's better. Yeah, we're still getting the inputs from the TR-8 because I've still got that set up as the sound card. So make sure your monitoring here is turned to off, or change your inputs from there. I'll get rid of it. So this is basically what we recorded. So again, if I loop that round, obviously we've got the ability then to, you know, we could pan your kick drum. Not that you'd ever want to do that, of course, because that would just be ridiculous. But we could do that. We could then start to put effects on. Which is not working for some reason. Let's just get rid of that. So what I would do to avoid any kind of conflicts of things coming backwards and forwards, because I think you need to have this on auto to be able to hear what your effects are doing, I would, once you've recorded it, I would then go back to the preferences and switch back to your normal sound card. Okay, so I'm now back on, just double check that, the USB audio device for my sound card. So we're not now using the TR-8, everything's muted on the TR-8, so nothing should play back from there. Okay, so we're now playing back what we've recorded. Oh, we've got that out there, that's why. Hang on, what's going off here? Let's take them off. And right, still got these external ins. Take them back. Because it's greyed those out, because those are no longer available. Let's just check what we've got now. Still getting something weird happening. That's better. So put those back on there. That kick drum is. So you have to mess about with your levels a little bit to get it working, but hopefully I could now, yeah. So you can now hear, you know, stick a massive reverb on there. So based on that, you've got all your audio recorded. Like I say, it's a bit fiddly because you've got to keep swapping around your sound interfaces. But let's get rid of that for now. Okay, but hopefully you get the idea that that's how I would record audio from the TR-8, and I've then got that audio to mix down and do with it as I wish. So the final part is to look at recording the MIDI from the TR-8. And there's a couple of reasons why you might want to do this. One is the TR-8 itself I find it's quite limiting in that there's only basically, you can only have 16 patterns on there, 32 if you've got the A and the B, and that in itself is not particularly user friendly, I don't find. So if you've got a really, really cool pattern on your TR-8 that you want to save for later and you don't want to use all your preset slots up on the hardware unit, you can record the MIDI into Ableton, and then you've got that pattern and you can play it back through the TR-8, which is also good for a live performance scenario. If you want to you know, just play back the MIDI and launch MIDI clips, and then you've got all the controls on the TR-8 for changing the volume and so on. So for recording the MIDI, straightforward enough. We've got the USB connection from the TR-8 into Ableton Live. So on your MIDI in, just select the TR-8. If I press play, you can see we're getting some activity up here, but nothing down here because the TR-8 is broadcast by default onto channel 10. So you need to set your MIDI in on channel 10. Monitor it in, you can see we've now got MIDI activity. Now you're going to get a bit of doubling up on sound because it's kind of coming in on, because it's monitoring the audio as well. So if you turn your monitoring off, trouble is you lose it there. Auto, you don't get it. You need to have that on in. You're just going to have to put up with the doubling up of the sound for now. Record it, and hopefully we'll get the MIDI notes appearing in there. Okay, so if we play that back, okay, so what I've done here, you can see that I've stopped the TR-8 playing. Nothing's playing on the TR-8. Okay, so that all that is coming from Ableton. You've got to make sure you set your monitoring to in, because if it's, sorry, to auto, because if it's there you won't hear it. It's sending the MIDI to there. That means we can then, obviously, we've got control over that, over the volume and the decay and the compression and everything from the TR-8, but it's all coming from the MIDI notes within Ableton. And then you've got obviously the facility in here to shift those notes around, edit them, do what you want with it, and you've got I find it personally this way a lot easier to work with an edit than trying to fiddle about with the step sequence on here, because it's a little bit limiting, but you still get the awesome sounds coming from the TR-8 doing it that way. So hopefully that shows you how to record the MIDI in there. Another way of doing it, and one way I will often use it, is this TR-8. I think this is the one. Yes. This little MIDI device, which is a Max for Live device, which is from these people, Protonica. They do a TB3 version, and they do a TR-8 version. For some reason I can't find the TR-8 version for the link this morning. But if you just do a search for, let's try it now, Max for Live TR-8 Protonica, I think it's this, that's the one. It doesn't seem to appear for some reason. Perhaps it's not the Protonica one. Let's try TR-8 control. Find it. There we go. That's the one you want. That's different. It's a different one. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's the one I've been using actually. It looks similar, but they're all basically the same kind of thing, and they're all free. These Macs, most of them are anyway. These Macs for Live devices. This one basically gives you a TR-8 drum rack. So you've got all your parts of the drum kit here. Now when you press play to start with, nothing's going to happen because you've got to set it up within the external instrument here. So we would need to send a MIDI to the TR-8, channel 10. Okay, and then if I play that, I've still got that there. I'm going to get rid of that. Set up a new MIDI clip. Control-Shift-M if you didn't know that shortcut. Very, very useful. And we can then program, because it's a bit easier here because we've got everything named. Okay, so we've now got on this channel here our kick drum. So I can program the MIDI in on here. Okay, again, remembering to stop the TR-8 playing or mute the TR-8. Or don't mute it because you won't hear it. But I can then use these to build up a MIDI pattern there. Let me just do the snare drum. You've got to remember you've got to do this for every single channel on here, which is a bit of a pain, but once you've done it once, it's there. Snare drum. Just get that down a bit. Okay, and so on. So if you go through each of these, just make sure you've got your MIDI into there. And it's another good way of building up MIDI patterns and programming them from within Ableton. As I say, I very rarely actually use the step sequencer on the TR-8. I usually just program everything from Ableton. That's great for doing backups of, like I said before, backups of your presets or for live use. Hope that makes sense. I know these videos together are quite lengthy. If you've got any further questions or you want me to try and address anything else, leave some comments in the box below. Please check out my my music while I'm on here. As you see, I produce under the name Resonator. Hopefully you'll give this video some likes and subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.